I've worked with the Navy SEALs, and I asked them, like, how do you pick like the guys that go on SEAL Team 6, right? Because they're the best, the best, the best, the best. And they drew a graph for me, and on one side they wrote the word performance, and on the other side they wrote the word trust. The way they define the terms is performance on the battlefield and performance off the battlefield. So this is your skills. This is, did you make your quarterly earnings, however you want to translate it, right? Performance, it's traditional. This is, how are you off the battlefield? What kind of person are you? The way they put it is, I may trust you with my life, but do I trust you with my money and my wife? They're SEALs. This is what they told me. Nobody wants this person, the low performer of low trust, of course. Of course, everybody wants this person, the high performer of high trust. Of course. What they learned is that this person, the high performer of low trust, is a toxic leader and a toxic team member. And they would rather have a medium performer of high trust, sometimes even a low performer of high trust, it's a relative scale, over this person. This is the highest performing organization on the planet, and this person is more important than this person. And the problem in business is we have lopsided metrics. We have 1,000,001 metrics to measure someone's performance and negligible to no metrics to measure someone's trustworthiness. And so what we end up doing is promoting or bonusing toxicity in our businesses, which is bad for the long game because it eventually destroys the whole organization. The irony is it's unbelievably easy to find these people. Go to any team and say, who, and they'll, they will all point to the same person. Equally, if you go to any team and say, who do you trust more than anybody else? Who's always got your back? And when the chips are down, they will be there with you. They will also all point to the same person. It's the best gifted natural leader who's creating an environment for everybody else to succeed, and they may not be your most individual highest performer. But that person, you better keep them on your team.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Again, my name is Maggie. We're here to pick up on part 2 of the series on trust. So this is Simon Sinek. He is an author and a speaker, and he talks a lot about leadership and trust. And I thought I'd show this video because, for me, it really shows the importance of trust over even performance. While performance is important, you saw how he described, even with the Navy SEALs, like a really elite organization, they're not going to pick the highest performing person that has low trust. They're going to go with somebody that's got higher trust, more integrity, and more of these characteristics that we've been talking about, okay? So for those who were here last week, did anybody do anything differently? I'm just curious, based on what we talked about with respect to commitment. Did it make you think any more about kind of going through the week? Yes? Yeah. Okay, awesome. I'm going to repeat that so everybody can hear. So the question that I asked last week when we talked about commitment, about how do you feel when somebody breaks a promise to you versus how do you feel when you break a promise to somebody else? So she's been sharing that with people at her work this week, and it's got people thinking about commitments. Anybody else? Anybody else have any insights from last week? Did you do anything differently? Yeah. Yep. Yep, thank you. So I'll repeat that so everybody can hear. So it kind of went along with the commitment pillar, and that we judge others by their actions, but we judge ourselves by our intentions. And so she was saying she's been really mindful of that because we so quickly jump to conclusions based on what we see from others. But again, we think for ourselves, well, I meant to. We don't know what others meant to do. We just see their actions and we may jump to conclusions. So, okay, thank you both for sharing. Okay, so today we're gonna go a little deeper on a couple of the other pillars. I'm gonna do just a really small recap for those who may not have been here last week. So we were talking about trust, and I used a textbook definition of trust here. It's a confident belief in a person, product, or organization that they are going to do what they said they are going to do. Oop, didn't mean to go that way. Okay, now I want to take a slight detour and talk about the word faith versus trust. We talk about faith a lot when it comes to our spiritual lives. We may not talk as much about trust, but they go hand in hand. And so here's my little way of maybe overly simplifying it. So faith is what we believe. So this is a lot of what we see here is what we believe, okay? Our creed is what we believe. Trust is how we live out that belief. And so we may have faith that God is going to do something, but are we actually living as if he is going to do it? And as I started thinking about that, it really kind of connected these two things and brought all of this really back to our spiritual lives. And so I'm going to give you a really simple example. It's not anything to do with your spiritual life, but it'll show you the connection between the two. So faith says, I believe that bridge is going to hold me, that I can walk across that bridge and it's going to hold me. Trust is actually walking across the bridge and going to the other side, not staying on one side and saying, yeah, I believe it's going to hold me, but actually doing it. So I want you to think about that when it comes to how we live out our spiritual life and how we put our trust in God. Do we just have faith in him or do we actually trust him? Okay? Okay, so again, just to kind of recap, I talked about these 8 pillars last week. They all start with C. They're kind of easy to remember. Clarity, compassion, character, competency, commitment, connection, contribution, and consistency. And they all go together. And so last week, we ended up doing a deep dive on the commitment pillar. Today, what we are going to do is talk about clarity and compassion. And we are going to do another little group discussion. So I've got some handouts in a few minutes where we're going to deep dive really specifically on compassion, because I think that one is so important, particularly as we live out our spiritual lives. Okay. I did show this last week, but I did want to show it again because I personally really like this verse from Proverbs. Confidence in an unfaithful or untrustworthy person in a time of trouble is like a bad tooth and a foot out of joint. And so basically this means that relying on an untrustworthy person in a time of trouble is like relying on a broken leg or a broken tooth, or an unsteady leg or a broken tooth. Are we the steady one or the unsteady one? Are we the broken one or are we the unbroken one for people around us? Number one way to influence people changing their opinions is these trusted relationships. Again, if we can build that trust among each other, then we can influence changing opinions. And so this really applies both in this room and outside of the room. So let's deep dive into the pillar of clarity. So people trust what's clear, but distrust what's ambiguous. I think if I use an example of politicians, this is probably why we don't trust them as much, because what they say may not be as clear, right? In your work setting, if you work with somebody and they just kind of beat around the bush, they don't say things very directly, you're less likely to trust them because they're not as clear. So there's 2 areas of clarity here, and I'm going to talk about these really from kind of a secular perspective, but we can bring it back in and apply it to our spiritual lives as well. So one is around strategic clarity. So think about organizations for whom you work. Is their mission clear? Is the vision clear? Are the values clear? And how does that tie to what you do every day? The second one is around communication. And this really affects us every day in terms of our daily messaging. So I'm going to talk about the second one first, which is around communication clarity. I'm going to give you 2 examples. So one is if I needed a presentation from somebody at work and I said, Jacqueline, can you help me with this presentation? I need it by tomorrow. Is that really clear? What I just asked her to do? No, why not? I didn't give her a deadline. I said tomorrow. Does that mean 8 o'clock? Does that mean? Yeah. I didn't give her anything. Okay, so if I told her I needed 12 slides on, because I know she's a pharmacist, I'm using her as an example, I need 12 slides on a particular medication because I want to understand what it does. Okay, that's maybe is a little more clear. But I didn't tell her why I need it. I didn't tell her who's the audience. Is it medical people that are going to be reading it? Is it non-medical people? And so we oftentimes overlook some of these details and just say, hey, I just need this by tomorrow. And then all of a sudden we're disappointed because I'm thinking I needed it by first thing. She may be thinking, oh, by the end of day is fine. And all of a sudden we've mismatched, okay? I'm going to give you another example, particularly for those of us that have kids, this will really resonate. So especially if you have multiple kids and you ask them to go clean their room. Do we get the same results? Okay, we may not get any results. Okay, okay, but I'll play out this example. So I have 3 children. One of them may tell me, well, you didn't tell me I had to make the bed because I didn't specify that that was included in cleaning the room. Somebody else may tell me, well, you didn't tell me that included the laundry. And then I'll have a third one that'll say, you didn't say by when. Okay? So I'm going to give you a nice little framework that you can use both at work and at home. And it's called ODC. So not OCD, but ODC. So is the outcome explained? Is it clear? So when I talk about cleaning the room, that means bed made, everything off the floor, it's vacuumed. I don't know what else. Maybe things that don't belong in the room are taken out of the room. But be really clear on what's the expected outcome. 2 is the deadline set, and a more specific deadline than just by tomorrow. It might be, hey, before we eat dinner tomorrow, or by 5 p.m. tomorrow. And then are any clarifying questions asked? So for example, if I go back to the example of the presentation that I asked Jackie to make, she may come back to me and say, who's the audience? Is it somebody that's a medical professional or not? Because that may change what she does, okay? This little framework I have found to be super, super powerful at work because we oftentimes make requests of others or set goals, and we're not clear on the details. And then we become disappointed when that expectation's not met. Or the other way around. Let's say your boss asked you to do something and you're like proud and you say, hey, I finished it, and they look at it and they're disappointed and you don't know why you've missed the mark. It's probably one of these 3 things. Okay? So keep this framework in mind. Again, it can be in this setting when we're asking somebody to do something, outside of this setting at work, in your personal life, or with your kids. So good luck trying to get them to clean their rooms, and if you find a way to do that, let me know, because even this may not work with them. All right, second little framework that I'm going to give you around clarity is something called how. And no, I didn't make a typo on the slide. So we oftentimes put out objectives and we're not specific and deep enough in terms of how we're actually going to get it done, okay? So if I said something like, I want to lose 10 pounds, that's not specific enough, because I'm probably never going to do it if I don't say exactly how I'm going to do it, okay? Now, if I said I'm going to lose 10 pounds by walking 10,000 steps every day, that gets a little bit closer. And then if I say I'm going to do that by walking 10,000 steps every day, and I'm going to make sure I get a 45-minute walk-in in the morning and a 45-minute walk-in in the evening, and I'm that specific, then I might actually stand a chance of getting it done. I've seen so many initiatives at work fail because we stay way up here with the objective, and we don't get it down into the detail where it's actionable for the teams, okay? So very much like me asking my children to clean their rooms, I might have to be really specific and say, I need the bed made, I need the laundry off the floor, I need the trash picked up, and so on, okay? And I'm using that simple example because I think it's easy to kind of get our heads around. But think about maybe at work, if you manage teams, how clear are you when you're giving those objectives? And are you actually working with them to work through the how of how they're actually going to get it accomplished, okay? In my prior life, I worked for a company with a really big brand, and market share was one thing they always measured. And every year they would say, we want to get our market share to 10%. And every year they did not get their market share to 10%. And now looking back, it's because the actions that they identified were not detailed enough into the organization to actually move the mark and achieve that market share objective, okay? So to summarize with clarity, clarity can unify and motivate. So when we're specific, we can unify the teams and actually motivate them to get stuff done. And let's all check back in with each other if our kids can clean their rooms, because that's really important too. All right, next one is compassion. So people put faith in those who care beyond themselves. We talked about this a little bit last week, but I'm going to go deeper on this one, and this is where we're going to have our group discussion. So a couple of verses that I thought were really important. So St. Paul writes, therefore, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, put on tender mercies, kindness, humility, meekness, and long-suffering. Buried in all of that is compassion. This is how we are to treat one another in our daily lives. Now, if we look, let's go back into the Old Testament. So this is from Exodus 33. The context here is Moses is speaking to God, and And this was when God was telling them to leave Egypt and go to the promised land, and Moses was asking a lot of questions. And what comes right before this is Moses asking God, he said, please show me your glory. And this is how God answered him. Then he said, I will make all my goodness pass before you, and I will proclaim the name of the Lord before you. I will be gracious to whom I will be gracious, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. We can show others God's glory by being compassionate to others. And I know this sounds easy, and I'm going to talk through a little more details in terms of how. So, stepping outside of this environment, but it also could apply to this environment, number one, people leave an organization is not feeling appreciated, not feeling recognized for what they're doing, okay? So I have a framework that I'm going to give you, and this is on the handout that I'm going to pass out. It's called LAWS, L-A-W-S, and I'm going to walk through what each of the 4 letters means, and this really gets into the detail of how we can go about showing others compassion. So number 1 is listening. So if I ask Father Nate, and I say, Father Nate, how are you? And as he's talking, I'm looking at something else and kind of walking around, and I'm not really listening to what he's saying. So we've heard about active listening, but really leaning in and listening to what's being said. And this is a lot more easy to say than to do because of the distractions that we have all around us. James, in the book of James, he wrote, so then, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, and slow to wrath. And I really want to focus on the part about swift to hear and slow to speak. It's so easy to get caught up when you're talking to somebody and listening to what they're saying, and all you're thinking about is how you're going to respond or what's on your mind to talk to them about. Take a moment and really listen to those around you. Second one for the A is appreciate. St. Paul wrote in Thessalonians, encourage one another and build each other up. We oftentimes take what people do around us too much for granted, and we don't take the time to tell them thank you. So take the time to tell people around you. It might be your spouse, might be other family members, it might be people with whom you work, your friends, but just thank them. It might be for a really small thing, but they'll really appreciate that. So show your appreciation for others. And gratitude really reflects being a Christian, like showing others how much you appreciate them, and it can really strengthen our relationships with others. Okay, third one, the W is wake up and be present. This is really about being mindful and being aware and being engaged in the moment. Again, if I'm having a conversation with Father Nate and we're talking and I'm looking at my phone while I'm talking to him, I'm not really being present, okay? We have so many distractions around us, it's too easy to kind of just not do this. So think about being engaged and being present. And then the last one, the S, is serve selflessly. So St. Paul wrote in Galatians, through love, serve one another. Serving others is one of the clearest ways for us to show Christ's love to others. And that's really kind of the power of the church. And again, this will be on your handout, and this will be really kind of the root of the discussion that we're going to go over today. So to kind of wrap this up before we go into our discussion, this is a verse from the first epistle of John. My little children, let us not love in word or in tongue, but in deed and in truth. So really to kind of bring it home, again, showing compassion to others through all these different ways is a way of showing God's love and God's grace to those around us, okay? Let me stop before we do our group discussions and ask this question. What gets in the way of the listening, the appreciation, the being present, and the serving? Huh? We're thinking about ourselves first. That's a great one. Yeah, we're not thinking about others. What else gets in the way? Assumptions. We may Yep, absolutely. Thanks, Susie. So assumptions about others, we're kind of jumping to conclusions, thinking about what they might say. What else gets in the way? Pride. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah. What else? I'm sorry? Vulnerability? Okay. Okay, I'm going to throw one out to you. It's everything else that we have going on in our brains and in our lives. We don't, like, for example, the appreciation or the serving. We may just think, I'm too busy, I've got too much to do. Well, I've got all this other stuff. I got my kids, I got this, I got that. And we may not take the time to do that. So as you go through this next week, and as you have the conversations in your groups, think about specifically what's getting in the way. What are those distractions? What are those obstacles? What is stopping you from doing this? And maybe focus on trying to remove one of those obstacles, and that'll open the door to do some of these other things. Okay? All right, so I do have a handout, and we should have more time this week, to have some conversation. So there's, again, a short quiz at the top. It's just 5 questions, and then there's some discussion points at the bottom for you to discuss, maybe in groups of 3 or 4, so smaller groups, so you can have some conversation. So enjoy your conversation today.